Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to week 2 of the Retention Academy, sponsored by ACU STAR Center. We are so excited that you guys are joining us today as we dive into the heart of the content and all the great subject matter we have here in regards to retention. I'm Suzanne Spear. I'm the Director of Workforce Development here at ACU, and I'm joined by other STAR Center staff on faculty for this cohort, Ann Hogan and Mariah Blake. And as I mentioned last week during the webinar, we have several guest faculty that we are just thrilled to have on board with us during this learning collaborative. And today we have Michelle Varcho, who is the Director of Education Outreach for 3RNet, and she is going to be talking to us about recruiting for retention. Just a little bit of housekeeping items before we get started here. We are recording this webinar and we will be posting the webinar on the discussion board after this call. So more on that at the very end of the call, but it is being recorded. Feel free to ask questions as we go along, and don't forget to have a little fun too. If you do have a question, you can raise your hand. You can place your question in the chat or questions box, and then at the end of the webinar today, Mariah will let us know and we will get those answered for you. And should you be having any technical difficulties today, logging in or any other thing regarding to the functionality of the webinar, feel free to email Mariah at mblake@clinicians.org. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Michelle, and she is going to dive in and get us started.
Well, thanks, Suzanne. I thank ACU for having me on today, and let's just get into it. We have a limited amount of time, so I'm going to try and go through this fairly quickly. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box, and we'll get them answered as quickly as we can. So is this what a lot of you feel like your recruitment strategy is? You're just find, hire, train, replace. You're just in this endless cycle. Well, we want to talk to you today. Okay. We want to talk to you today about recruitment for retention. So at 3RNet, we're very much about not recruiting and retention, but that your retention actually starts within the recruitment process itself. And some of our core beliefs that we have is that it is a process and it's teamwork. It takes teamwork and a process, that those are both key ingredients to doing recruitment for retention. We also believe that recruitment is both a science and an art, and that competition is fierce. And so therefore your communication must be candidate oriented. And we're going to delve into that particular point a little bit more later on in this presentation. And then also a little bit, I'm going to tell you some tools that exist to help you recruit more effectively. So when we talk about process, team, or key, we basically want you to think about who is responsible for what, okay? Like when you look at your process, who is responsible for doing what? And for some reason, you know, if someone is out, like your main contact person, think about this. Who would answer the phone? If something happened to your main person, who would answer the phone? So it's more, this whole thing is a teamwork. It can't just be a one-man show. And although I'm sure some of you feel that way, but you need to think it through on who else can help you. So recruitment is both a science and an art, and it really just comes down to this. If it was a science, we could sell you our manual for $19.95, and then everybody would be happy and we'd all be extremely wildly successful. And then if it was an art, there wouldn't be any best practices or guidelines to follow. So your best recruiters know that you follow the process, but you always adapt it to your particular circumstance. When we talk about competition is fierce again, things that you think are important versus things that the candidate thinks is important. What's important to whom? You might have the best whatever insert factor here in the world, but if the candidate doesn't need it or want it, then the result is null. You need to be thinking about what you have or what the candidate needs, and looking at things from their view. There are a number of things that you can look at within your state, their state and national organizations, and I'm going to talk a little bit later on about some free and low-cost tools that can help you with your recruitment strategies. So just real quick, talking about the process, we believe very much that recruitment for retention is a process, and it's broken into 4 different parts. There's part 1, which is planning and preparation, which is usually the most neglected part of the process. This is where you're defining your opportunity and defining your ideal candidate, creating a budget, assessing your needs, those types of things. Part 2 is sourcing. Part 3 is screening those candidates. And then part 4, of course, is follow up and follow through, which is in reference to retention. Here's the 15 steps that we talk about when we talk about the process that I'm going through. We are not going to go through each one of these steps. So I wanted to give you an idea that there really is a process to recruitment for retention. And again, I touched on a little bit. Planning 1 is really assessing everything. Part 2 is searching, generating candidates, and that's where I'm going to delve into a little bit today. Part 3 is screening. Your interview is one of the most key tools that you can use, and your retention, again, starts with that interview. And then part 4 is, of course, doing your follow-up negotiations and developing a retention plan. So as we're going through this, a couple of things I want you to think about when you're thinking about where you work at. Why do you work there? What makes you stay? Why did you take the job in the first place? And then why do you still go there every day? How are you engaged? And then the other thing I want you to think about as we go through this a little bit, does your facility or community do some things better than others? And if the answer is yes, then what are those? And keep those in mind, because we're going to talk a little bit about unique selling points and what makes you unique. And then the last thing I want you to think about as we're going through this, do different candidates want different things in a job? Do you believe that's true, yes or no? Okay? And then if you do think that, is it possible to strategically target candidates based on your strengths? And I'm always, yes, no, this sounds complicated. How many of you are just happy to have somebody, right? So these are kind of the 4 questions I want you to keep in the forefront of your mind when we're talking today. And how do you generally market to your providers? Are you talking about high salaries, loan repayment, hunting and fishing? Is an advantage still an advantage when most everyone offers it? And what I mean by this question is, let's take hunting and fishing. If your area is really great for hunting and fishing, you, of course, want to draw a candidate that is an interest that they have, because then they will be satisfied in your area, right? But how is your opportunity any different from any other employer in that area? What do you do that makes hunting and fishing so much better? Do you pay for their annual fishing license? Do you have a really good time off policy, and you actually are able to let the provider or whomever take the time off to enjoy the hunting and fishing? So not only is hunting and fishing a great thing to put place in your ad, but it's also adding that extra little hook of like, we also do this for you. And with all that in mind, that's exactly what you're trying to do, is find out what factors make you stand out from your competitors. So we're going to get into the section that we're getting into would be section 2, part 2, which is sourcing candidates. And we're going to talk I'm going to get into a lot about how to write a proper job ad. This is one of the first steps you can do in retention, because if you write the job ad to where you're talking about your strengths and what you can give the candidate, and thinking about it from the candidate's perspective, you're already one step ahead in your retention efforts. So the first thing I want you to think about is, people buy products for their own reasons, not yours. And so you are selling a product. And whenever you're writing your job ad, this is something that you need to keep in mind. Your product is your opportunity, your opening that you have. So what you don't need in a job ad. You don't need the obvious. Candidate must be a graduate from an accredited medical school. If you're looking for a provider, they already know that they need to have gone to an accredited medical school. But don't waste your space in the ad with that kind of stuff. Just so you know, I am a human resources. That's my background. So even this next point, I'm sorry to all my fellow HR people, but we really don't need our HR lingo in there. We don't need to call the job candidate the incumbent. We need to make it as layman as possible. You also, please don't put every details about every aspect of your job. And you also don't need excruciating detail about your organization. We were founded in 1904. In 1906, we switched presidents. In 1908, that's not the information that the candidate needs, nor do they want. Also, one point I always like to make during this is, please, if you're just using your job description, please stop using that as a job ad. Take the time and actually write an effective job ad. So the only thing you really want in your job ad is what matters to a candidate. And I know you're probably thinking to yourself, well, how do I know what matters to a candidate? I've never met the person. I'm going to go through a couple of points that's going to help you identify that. So if you can answer these questions from the candidate. Belonging. Am I the kind of person you're looking for? Fulfillment. Will I be content? Esteem. Will I be respected? And prosperity. Will I thrive? So when I asked you before, why do you work at your location? Why do you work at your job and go every day? Whenever you did your own interview for there, did these questions get answered for you? And how were those answered? So when you're going and answering these four things, what's your competitive advantage? Belonging. It's your story, your provider's story, the teamwork. Do you have the highest patient satisfaction in the state or in the county? What is your story? Put that in there. Fulfillment. Talk about the quality of care. Is there clinical autonomy? To make a difference. Our industry is very big on mission-driven people. They want to know about making that difference. That's part of the reason that they're in the field that they're in. Esteem. What kind of clinical leadership opportunities? Is there opportunities to be a mentor? Is there opportunities to teach? Is there opportunities to be a leader within the community itself? And then, of course, prosperity, loan repayment, competitive pay, the FTCA. All of these things together are the things that you're wanting to capture. Another good bit of advice to do is when you're writing a job ad, get input from the experts, your staff. What matters to them? And include yourself in this as well. What matters to them? Why do they work there and not somewhere else? What key words or phrases carry meaning and impact? I want you to pay particular attention to the third point there. What particular keywords or phrases? Because you're going to use these also whenever if you're using any social media, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So keywords and phrases such as rural health, family medicine, those type of things. Make sure that your job ad is visual. Use links to your website and others, simple videos, photos, people, facilities, surroundings, maps, and attractions. So one of the things I want you to keep in mind, and we'll talk about this probably a little bit more, is when you're writing a job or when you're placing a job ad, 9 times out of 10, your job ad is being looked at on a phone. Okay, every one of us has an iPhone or some type of phone, and that's where everything is being looked at right now. So that's why it needs to be really visual. We are a society of 3-second people. If it doesn't grab our attention in the first 3 seconds when we look at it on our phone, we skim on by it. So this is what I don't want. This is an example of what not to write. This basically is someone's job description that they just plastered on there. Can you imagine looking at this on your phone or your iPad? Okay, this is an example of what not to do. So here's an example that might work better. So we have here XYZ Community Health Center in Philadelphia. You see right off the bat that they talk a little bit about how long they've served Philadelphia. They talk a little bit about how many, there's 50 practitioners at 7 locations, so they can understand the size of the facility, of the organization, and where they're going. They talk a little bit about what type of services they offer. And then right here is a video, why nurse practitioners choose to work. That's a very simple little video that they've included the link. And they can talk about the expectations, provide high quality care. There's leadership roles. So see, this ad has everything that we've talked about: self-esteem, fulfillment, everything that we're needing is in this ad. We can talk a little bit about clinical autonomy. There's another link right here talking about the state loan repayment. So, and then we finish up a little bit with Philadelphia itself, a little bit about the location and what they can expect if they live there. So that was a great ad. That ad before was a great posting if you were posting it on a job board, like with 3RNet or Indeed or wherever you're posting, that they can take a little bit of time and peruse. This right here would be a great ad for like Facebook or something that's a little bit, you have a little tighter space on. And this is basically the same thing. It's just shortened down. And I put it this way for the presentation, but I would actually chunk it out a little bit, put it in little sections and bullet it just so it would look a little cleaner and a little more visual. Again, we have a link to the community health center. We have that link again about why the nurse practitioners choose to work there, and a link again about the state loan repayment. Real quick, I've included in this PowerPoint how you can make a YouTube video. This is actually from a PowerPoint, like if you just wanted to put together a quick PowerPoint about your facility, include photos or whatever, and then you can turn it into a video. I've given you the instructions here on how to do that, and then you can include that link as well. This is just optimizing your YouTube video. There, you can boost who can see this by putting in little tags. If you'll see down here, that's what these are. Anything that you want to put in, like healthcare recruiting, interview, video interview. And then make sure and this is all under advanced settings. So you have your basic info that you can put, but then when you go into advanced settings is how you can also optimize your YouTube videos. Suzanne, I'm not sure why it's not advancing for me. There we go. Thank you. So on social media, I want to talk a little bit about social media. And what we use at 3RNet is we use Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+, and YouTube. Google+, I always joke about. I don't think anybody in the world uses Google+, but they still have a presence, and because Google kind of runs the world, we still maintain a presence on Google+. But some of the things that you can use social media for are blog posts, to promote events, and then resources from your partners. So, for example, if you're wanting to have a strong social media presence and you're always like, oh, but I don't have time to always come up with new material, use partners. If it's Nurses Week, go out to the nurses associations and see what they put and just copy their link out. Look at 3RNet, look at the National Health Service Corps. Talk a little bit about Facebook and Twitter ads. So Facebook is awesome in that you can target a small audience or a national audience in many, many ways. And you can spend as little as $5 to do this. So one of the keys that I always say is, if you've posted a position, and a lot of times people are like, well, just only the people that like my page will ever see that. You can actually go into the ads and boost it. And what you do is you tag things like AAFP. So you want the friends of AFP. So anybody that has liked AAFP or follows the AAFP, they will now be able to see your post. It will pop up on their feed. Same thing, ACU. If you're a friend of ACU, you can tag ACU. You can go in and tag, and you can do this for as little as $5 and reach anywhere from 100 to a few thousand people. It's very effective. Same thing with Twitter. Hootsuite, this is a little bit, this is just a resource that I really like to talk about if you're an organization that doesn't have a lot of resources or doesn't have a lot of people with a lot of man time to maintain your social media. Hootsuite is a free site that you can go to, which is hootsuite.com. And if you, it will link to all of your social media. That's what's here in the red. So for us, we have our Facebook, our Twitter, our LinkedIn, and our Google+, all here as all of our social media. You just write out your post, whatever you want to write. And what I usually do is I write for Twitter because it has the most restrictive amount. So it's like 144 characters, which I think actually that's been bumped up. But so I write this as a tweet. And then I go out and I schedule it. I can either do it immediately or I can schedule it to go out next week. And I do that here, and then you just hit save or you hit schedule and it goes out. And it will hit all 4 of my social media sites without me having to go into each one. The other great thing about this with the auto schedule, you can sit down and take 10 minutes and write 5 or 6 ads, whatever you want to put in here. Schedule one out once a week, and then you've got a month worth of social media, and you don't have to spend so much time. And again, it goes to every one. You can have it go to 1, you can have it go to 3, you can have it go to all of them. It's a very, very neat little tool that we always like to encourage people to use. It's free. There is a paid version if you want to do more with it. I think it will actually tell you peak times to run your ads. But we've always managed to just use the free one, and it worked very effective for us. Some more free and low cost resources that we have Fiverr.com. So this is a really great website. You can go to Fiverr.com, and for as little as $5, you can get almost anything you want. They can help you do a whiteboard video. We actually did one for our website that ended up being about $15. They can go look at your website. And if you're saying, can you look at this from a candidate perspective and tell me if it's a very friendly, or look at it from a patient perspective, they can give you an audit on your website and give you suggestions. There's just a million things out there that you can do with Fiverr. Weebly is a very easy to use website builder. If for some reason you're wanting to do your standalone recruitment website all on your own, Weebly is extremely easy to use. We use it for a lot of our websites at 3RNet. And then also the last thing I want to talk about is Canva. It provides free marketing flyers. They have thousands and thousands and thousands of flyers, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel if you're wanting to create some kind of flyer. And if you are a nonprofit, you get a free membership to it. You just have to show them your nonprofit status. Other tips and tricks, make sure you're using your email signature to market your organization, put it your logo, your website link, social media, upcoming events. We currently have it on ours. We have our annual conference coming up. And so that's what's on our link, our email signature line with a link to that. And then again, use your network. For us, it's our members, but you can use, ACU, anybody else. Make sure you're using them to help you promote. So the last thing I want to talk about, just so you recap everything, recruitment is a process, okay? Make sure you're identifying and communicating your strengths and create marketing with the candidate in mind. So when you're writing that job ad, you're placing any kind of ad, you're creating any kind of marketing materials that you want to send out, if it's at a career fair that you're wanting to hand out, if it's a candidate that you've talked to and you want to send a marketing packet about your facility, about the opportunity, make sure you're keeping the candidate in mind. And those 4 things that we discussed, the belonging, the self-esteem, make sure that's the angle that all of your documents are coming from. Don't skip on the planning step if you can. And then again, we firmly believe that retention starts in recruitment.
Michelle, thanks so much. You gave us so much information, and we really appreciate all the great tips and tricks that you shared with us today. And I know that everyone will enjoy going back and looking back at this presentation and getting the all the takeaways and all of the free resources that you shared with us today. So just a couple of things as we wrap up here today. So next week is our first office hour rather. So you can log in next Wednesday, February 21st at 2 o'clock Eastern, and you'll use that link there, and that will be our go-to meeting room, and you will be able to log in there, and Michelle will be on, and she will be presenting your first homework assignment. Now, don't be afraid. It won't be too difficult, but it'll just be something really, a tool that you can take and to put some of these processes that Michelle talked about today in action. So tune in next week at 2 p.m. Eastern, and she will present the homework there. And then we will be on the line from 2 o'clock until 3 o'clock Eastern. So we'll be on the line after she presents the homework to go over any questions that you might have for her or the rest of the STAR Sentinel faculty here to answer those questions for you. And I mentioned the discussion board at the top of this webinar. And so look today, this afternoon, for an email rather, from info@chcworkforce.org, introducing you to our discussion board, giving you the login information there. So I encourage you, as soon as you receive that link, to go ahead and click on it and make sure you can get into the discussion board and take a look at week 1 and week 2's the webinar recordings will be there, but just take a minute and look and make sure that you can log in, and feel free to contact us if you have having any trouble logging in. So, and that's it for the week. I don't think any questions have come in during this time. So if you think of anything during the week, you can save it for the office hour on next Wednesday, and we can walk through it then. Looks like Anne asked the question about do you recommend that everyone have a YouTube channel for their health center?
Yeah, thanks, Anne. At a minimum, okay, so a lot of facilities are really small. They have one person wearing the hat of helping recruit, their executive assistant. So having an actual channel is a bit much, because at that point you're needing to do a number of videos. But I believe at a minimum they should have at least one YouTube video that at least talks about their facility, at least shows the facility. And if they could do another one or have access to one about their community, I think those would be 2 of the most important ones that they could do.
Great. Thanks so much to Anne for the question, and for Michelle for that great answer. Well, it looks like we're at just about 2:30, so we are going to wrap up today. Thanks again for joining us, and we will talk to you next week for our office hours and the homework assignment. Take care, everybody.